I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. New upcoming hip-hop group from New York City is going to get reviewed by a couple of dudes from Iowa.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of culture switch.
Yes.
This group is called Ratking, and their first album is called So It Goes. Ratking, I would say that this is it's classified as alternative hip-hop, but what is this? They pretty much give you a nice kind of thesis statement in opening the album. You know, you have just kind of some ambient samples going on, and then, you know, you hear one of the guys in the group, you know, providing some vocals, or not really vocals, just spoken word, you know, just anecdotes, really, about the hit, like what sort of music that they're going for here, and how the you know, how hip hop is evolving, and how generations they're kind of declaring Ratking as like the new generation of hip hop, and that the generations of like Dre and Tupac and Biggie, those guys were the previous generation, and so those references don't really, you know, mean as much this generation, and it's time for hip hop to move on.
It also makes me feel old.
Yes, absolutely. These guys are young. They're in their late teens to early 20s, and they're, you know, from New York City, so you get a lot of you know, culture references there. Now, So It Goes is just from the sound. How would you describe the sound here, Tom?
Well, it is a lot of sample based.
A lot of samples, usually repeated.
Yep. And as far as the beats go, you can definitely tell that it's East Coast.
Yes,
I would say, as opposed to the West Coast, kind of like you know, G-Funk era of, you know, they mentioned that they're not really going for that era. That's kind of in the past, you know, than like the big dance beats. This is a little bit more subtle, a little bit more kind of atmospheric.
They use a lot of drum machines to construct the beats, so it's really a mixture of samples and whatever other production effects they're putting on, and then the whatever drum machine beat that they're applying. And then a lot of, I mean, vocally they you know, they take turns rapping, and it's like they definitely have pretty distinct voices, I would say, as they rap. But you know, this track starts off, the first track, 357. You know, it kind of just has this warm, inviting feel to it, and then at the end of it, they're going damn, and then it cuts into a song called Canal, which is I'd say a fairly generic rap track. So that kind of gets into my first criticism of this record, is you can't open a record with a pretty decent hip hop opener, and then it's almost like an intro track, declaring that you're going to reinvent your music and that this is the new generation, you're so different from all this stuff, and then have a very just generic hip-hop track. Like, it's just, it's like you just, right off the, you know, the starting gun goes off and you just fall on your face. Like, that's kind of what it came off like to me. However, they recover a little bit. Track 3, Snow Beach, is definitely more progressive. It's a 6-minute, 42-second track, and I would even call this almost experimental hip-hop. This song really has two parts. It has an obvious Gorillaz Plastic Beach influence, and you know, really, other than the shitty drum machine, and I get a little bit annoyed with the vocals, I like the sound that they're going for, a lot of the electronic melodies that you hear.
Yeah, the way that they do the hook and the chorus and kind of switch between octaves, you know, they change like the intensity, the presentation, and everything. That really does help mix it up, and it's got kind of a laid-back vibe. That is a really cool track.
Shifts halfway through and goes into a much more traditional yet well done, just kind of full hip-hop sound approach, almost kind of like what you would hear from like the Roots or something, like almost a full band sound. So Six Stories has King Cruel on it, featuring King Cruel, and that song is probably, you know, while it's still pretty mainstream hip-hop, and maybe, you know, a lot of the lyrical references are more timely, but at the same thing, it's not a reinvention at all.
No, it's not a reinvention. It's still a good track, but you're absolutely right that I think it was, you know, a bit kind of cocky to kind of set up those expectations and make that kind of statement on the opening track. Now, obviously, you have to take into account, too, that our interpretation of what they're saying in that opening track, you know, there's certainly some implications in there that we're taking and maybe running with just a little bit, but still, you have to think about what they're implying. You have to think about how that lines up with the music. So our interpretations, just kind of a disclaimer there. But as we continue to move through the album here, getting to the back half, I think the back half just suffers. Just absolutely suffers. And I just want to come out there and say it. I think that really all the highlights are in the front half here. And then the back half, it's not even just a case of them repeating some of the stuff. You know, we talk a lot about how sometimes the back half of albums can seem weak simply because they're reestablishing the same ideas that were already put together on the front half of the album. I don't even think that's the case here. I actually think think the back half sounds decently different in some ways, but it's just worse. And it's not even all the beats. A lot of it is just the rapping. I found that that's when their vocals start to really annoy me, especially like tracks like Puerto Rican Judo. When the beat actually comes in on that, it starts to get a little steady. I think there's maybe something like a tambourine or a more steady hi-hat that comes into the beat, and they start rapping, and then I'm actually kind of digging it. I'm like, yeah, this is pretty cool. And then the last half of that song, just, oh my god, another member of the group comes in and is just really, really obnoxious in their presentation. And then you have the female at the comes in at the end, I believe, Wavy Spice. I'm assuming that's who that is. That track features Wavy Spice, and I find her part to be extremely obnoxious. To me, it just sounds very amateur. It sounds very kind of naive in presentation. It just sounds like these guys got hold of recording equipment and decided to have a fun weekend with it, but didn't really accomplish much. And that's a pretty harsh criticism, I will admit. And I'm referring mostly to the back half of the album with some of those spots. Take is another one that I know you and I both really didn't like. It just starts to get really annoying, and it's weird because there are some really good moments on the front half, but there it's just where it starts to lose
this
interest.
album isn't without momentary strokes of genius, but you're right, the back half suffers, and I think that hip-hop to me is all about the vocal delivery. The beats are important, the production's important, like all that stuff is elements of this, but hip-hop is about the vocal delivery, and really lyrics play a big role in that. And while I think lyrically this band may have a point of where they're going in a direction, vocal presentation is just god-awful on this record, and really because they're taking turns and none of them are that great, you don't get a very consistent vocal presence either. No. So the delivery is not good, their rhythm isn't good, their rhymes aren't that good, their delivery isn't overly impressive at all as far as like rhythm is concerned. I mean, I really struggled liking anything about the vocals at any point in time on this record, and it just killed the listen for me. It made it really hard to keep listening to this album over and over again, especially the back half when I want to skip tracks. This album is too long. I think this is what, in the 50s of minutes?
Yeah, like 54, 55. So.
And there's numerous tracks on here, especially in the back half, that you could just cut and make this a much more compact listen, and I think that would have helped the album flow at least, and maybe have taken some of the weight off of some of the bad tracks.
Yeah, and that's true. It would have taken the weight off. But the problem is that I think on this 55-minute album, there's only maybe like 20 to 25 minutes of content
that might
I
be
really
generous.
like. Yeah, and at that point, you barely even have a full album. Yeah. So, I mean, this is a case where I would say that there's honestly more weak material than strong material here. You can't just trim it down and make it better, because even if you trim off the worst parts, I still think you're going to have a majority of the album not being very strong.
That's a very good point. You know what you're giving it?
I'm going to give it a 64.
You know what, Tom? I agree with you.
Okay.
It's a 64. This is a 64, which is not a good record. We don't recommend this, and a lot of people requested this. So, if you like this, we're really curious. Give us your argument as to why.
Yeah.
And, maybe it'll help us listen to this album from a different perspective and increase our appreciation of it. We'd love to hear from you at www.velocitiesandmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. Also, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. Let Tom or I know what albums you'd like to see us review on this channel. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.